I still remember the day I married Daniel. The sun was shining, the air smelled of lilies, and my heart felt like it could burst from happiness. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, two souls meant for each other. He was quiet, yes, but I loved that about him. He had this calmness that made me feel safe. I used to tell my mother, he doesn't talk much, but when he does, it feels like the whole world listens. If only I had known how silence can turn into cruelty. The first few months of our marriage were peaceful. We'd wake up together, drink coffee by the window, and plan our tiny dreams. A small house, maybe children one day, maybe even a dog. But then, something changed. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, like winter creeping in after autumn. He stopped talking. At first, I thought he was tired from work. Daniel was an architect, and I knew how draining his projects could be. But soon, even on weekends, he'd sit there, phone in hand, eyes distant, replying with one-word answers. "Dinner's ready?" "Okay." "How was your day?" "Fine." It's strange how silence can make a house feel haunted, even when two people are inside it. I started to wonder if I'd done something wrong. I'd try to make his favorite meals, lasagna with extra cheese, chicken soup the way his mother used to make. But he'd just nod, eat quietly, and go to bed early. No warmth, no thank you, no glance that said I mattered. I'd lie beside him, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between his breaths, wishing he'd reach out and say something, anything. But he never did. One night, I gathered my courage. "Daniel, have I done something to upset you?" He looked at me for a moment, eyes cold and unreadable. Then he said, "Not everything's about you, Emma," and turned off the light. It was such a small sentence, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. From that night on, the silence between us grew heavier. It filled every corner of our home, the kitchen, the living room, even the air felt thick with it. I'd try to start conversations, but they'd die halfway through. He didn't yell, he didn't hit, he just didn't care enough to speak. And somehow, that hurt more. I started spending more time alone. I'd walk to the park near our house and sit on a bench, watching strangers laugh, parents chase their kids, couples hold hands, all the small things that once felt ordinary, but now looked like miracles. Sometimes I'd imagine Daniel walking beside me again, fingers intertwined, smiling like he used to. But every time I came home, that hope faded. The quiet would greet me like a ghost. One evening, I found him in the living room, scrolling through his phone. I said softly, "Daniel, do you even love me anymore?" He didn't look up. "Don't start this again." I felt a lump in my throat. "I just want to know if I still matter to you." He sighed, put his phone down, and said, "Why do you always need validation? Can't you just be quiet for once?" His words broke me in ways I didn't even understand. I wasn't asking for much, just a sign that I wasn't invisible. But to him, my pain was noise. After that, I stopped asking. I learned to swallow my feelings, to hide my loneliness behind polite smiles. At family dinners, we looked perfect. Daniel, the calm husband, me, the graceful wife. People would compliment us, saying, "You two are such a beautiful couple." And I'd smile, knowing they were praising a picture frame with nothing inside. At night, when he'd roll to his side of the bed and turn away, I'd whisper, "Good night," just in case one day he decided to whisper it back. He never did. Months passed, then years. And I began to forget what it felt like to be loved, But deep down, I kept hoping, foolishly, desperately, that maybe he was just going through something. Maybe he'd come back to me. Maybe one morning, He'd wake up, look at me, and realize I'd been there all along, waiting for him to speak. But the truth? He wasn't lost. He'd simply stopped caring. And I was the one who refused to see it. One rainy evening, I was standing by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, when I saw him pull into the driveway. He didn't notice me watching. He sat in the car for a long time, smiling faintly at his phone, a kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. When he finally came inside, he was humming softly, a song I didn't recognize. "Long day?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "You should go to bed early. I've got some work to finish." He kissed my forehead, a quick, empty gesture, and disappeared into his study. That night, I lay awake, wondering who or what made him smile like that. Something inside me shifted. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was curious. And curiosity, I would soon learn, can be the first step toward truth and heartbreak. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified: the ticking clock, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the rain tapping gently against the window. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering when my life had turned into this strange, cold silence. Daniel had once told me that trust was the foundation of love. But what happens when the person you trust the most becomes a stranger in your own home? It had been months, maybe even years, since he had looked at me the way he looked at his phone that night. That faint, secret smile had burned itself into my mind. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself not to assume the worst. Maybe it was a work message, maybe a friend, maybe anything but what my heart feared. But hearts are strange. They always know the truth before the mind accepts it. The next morning, Daniel left early for work. He barely said goodbye. I stood by the window and watched him drive away. Something in me refused to let the unease go this time. When I went to tidy the living room, I saw it. His phone. He'd left it on the couch. For a long time, I just stared at it. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. I'd never gone through his things before. I'd always believed that love meant respecting privacy. But love, I was realizing, had to go both ways. The screen was locked, of course, but something told me I'd find a way in. It's strange how your instincts sharpen when your heart feels danger. I remembered his old passcode, our wedding date. I whispered it softly as I typed, 061217. The screen unlocked. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I hesitated, but then curiosity and pain pushed me forward. I opened his messages. There was nothing unusual at first. A few from coworkers, one from his mother. And then I saw it. Sophie. The heart beside the name hit me like a punch to the chest. I tapped the thread. The first message I saw was from last night. "I miss your voice. When will you tell her?" "Soon. She doesn't suspect anything." The phone slipped slightly in my hand. I couldn't breathe. There were dozens of messages. Good mornings, good nights, little jokes, and photos. They weren't just words. They were pieces of a life I wasn't part of. He had built a new world with her, while I was still waiting for him to notice me. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, staring at the words, feeling something inside me collapse quietly. My body felt numb, but my mind was screaming. How long? How long had I been living with a man who was already gone? I scrolled further back. The messages went months back. The same time he'd started to grow distant. So it wasn't stress. It wasn't exhaustion. It was betrayal, wearing the mask of silence. My hands shook as I put the phone down. I couldn't look at it anymore. I walked to the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter just to steady myself. My reflection in the window looked like someone else. Pale, hollow, lost. All those nights I'd cried quietly beside him. He was probably texting her under the covers. All those times I'd cooked his favorite meals. He was thinking of someone else's smile. The pain wasn't just emotional. It was physical. I could feel it in my chest, like a heavy stone pressing against my heart. I didn't tell him that night. I didn't even confront him. I couldn't. I didn't know how to breathe, let alone speak. When he came home, I smiled. I asked about his day. I served dinner. I laughed when he made small talk. It was the most Oscar-worthy performance of my life. The faithful wife pretending not to know that her husband was in love with someone else. That night, after he fell asleep, I watched him, really watched him. The way you look at a photograph you know you'll have to throw away. His face looked peaceful, almost innocent. How could someone so calm cause so much pain without a word? I wanted to shake him, scream, ask why, but all I did was whisper softly, "Why wasn't I enough?" He didn't answer. He never did. The next few days were a blur. I'd go through the motions, breakfast, work, dinner, but my mind was somewhere else. Every time he smiled at his phone, it felt like a knife twisting deeper. And yet, I stayed quiet. Maybe because I was scared of the answer. Maybe because part of me still loved him. But silence can only hold so much truth before it breaks. One evening, about a week later, I was setting the table when his phone buzzed again. He was in the shower. I didn't want to look, but I did. It was a message from Sophie. "I can't wait to see you this weekend. Did you book the hotel?" Hotel. My hands went cold. He had told me he had a conference that weekend, out of town, 2 days. I'd even ironed his shirts for it. I put the phone back exactly where it was and walked into the bathroom. The sound of running water filled the air. I leaned against the doorframe and said quietly, "Daniel, do you love me?" The water stopped. There was silence, and then his voice, calm, indifferent. "Of course I do. Why are you asking?" I wanted to scream, "Because you're lying." But instead I said, "No reason, just wondering." When he came out, he smiled faintly and kissed my cheek. "You think too much, Emma." Maybe I did. Maybe I thought too much, felt too much, loved too much, and maybe that's why it hurt so deeply. That night, as I lay beside him, I decided something. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know the full truth, even if it destroyed me. So that weekend, while he packed his bags for his conference, I smiled and helped him fold his shirts. I even packed his favorite tie, the one I'd given him on our first anniversary. When he left, he kissed my forehead. "Take care of yourself, okay?" I nodded. "Always." The moment his car disappeared down the street, I picked up my coat. I had a plan. The morning Daniel left for his conference, the sky was gray, heavy with clouds, as if even the weather could sense the storm brewing inside me. I stood by the window, watching him load his suitcase into the car. He looked calm, whistling softly, the same tune I'd once loved to hear. When he drove away, I waited 5 minutes, long enough for him to believe I'd gone back to bed. And then I grabbed my coat, keys, and a small notebook. My hands trembled as I started the car. I wasn't sure if I was more terrified of being caught or of what I might find. I followed him at a distance, far enough to stay unseen, but close enough that I could still make out the shape of his car in the morning fog. Every mile we drove, my heart pounded harder. He finally turned off the main road, heading toward the coast, not toward the city where the conference was supposed to be. My stomach tightened. I knew then. There was no meeting, No clients, no hotel for work. There was something else. Someone else. After about an hour, he pulled into a small seaside inn. Quaint, private, the kind of place people go to hide, not to be found. I parked behind a row of trees and waited. A few minutes later, she arrived. A woman in her early 30s, slim, elegant, her hair flowing with the wind. She wore a long beige coat and a smile that could light up a room. I didn't need to see her face twice. I knew it was her, Sophie. I recognized her from the pictures on his phone. The same smile, the same softness. Daniel stepped out of the car, his whole demeanor changing. His eyes brightened, his shoulders relaxed. And then he did something I hadn't seen him do in years. He laughed. It was the sound I used to crave, the one I thought I'd lost forever. But it wasn't lost. He'd just given it to someone else. When he kissed her, openly, fearlessly, like I didn't exist, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not with screams or tears. It was a quiet shattering, like glass cracking under the weight of years of silence. I sat there, frozen, watching the man I loved become a stranger right before my eyes. For a moment, I thought of getting out, confronting them, screaming his name. But then I saw how gentle he was with her, how easily he touched her face, how effortlessly they fit together. And I realized there was nothing left to fight for. He hadn't just fallen out of love with me. He had already built a new life, one that didn't include me at all. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't look away. I stayed there for hours, hidden behind the trees, watching their laughter drift across the parking lot like echoes of everything I'd lost. When they finally went inside the inn, hand in hand, I sat in the silence, clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The sun was setting when I finally started the car and drove home. The whole way, I didn't cry. I just felt empty, like someone had scooped out all the emotions inside me and left a hollow shell behind. When I reached home, the house felt even colder than usual. His absence, once painful, now felt merciful. I sat on the couch, staring at the photo on the wall, our wedding picture. Me in white, him in black, both smiling like we had the world at our feet. I whispered to the photo, "Where did we go wrong, Daniel? Was I not enough? Or did you just stop trying?" The next morning, he called. His voice was warm, almost cheerful. "Hey, honey, the conference went great. I'll be back tomorrow." I swallowed hard. "That's good to hear. I'll bring you something nice, okay?" "Sure," I said softly, pretending my voice didn't tremble. When he hung up, I sat there, holding the phone, wondering how someone could lie so easily, so beautifully, as if honesty was an outdated language he no longer spoke. That night, I finally cried. Not quiet tears like before, deep, broken sobs that shook my whole body. Years of silence poured out of me. I cried for the woman who had loved him unconditionally, for the girl who had believed in forever, and for the stranger I'd become in my own marriage. When I finally stopped, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face pale, but there was something new in my reflection, something fierce. I realized that while he had taken my love, my laughter, and my trust, there was one thing he hadn't taken yet: my strength. The next day, when he came home, he brought me flowers. Roses. Red. Perfect. Meaningless. He smiled. "Missed me?" I looked at him, forcing a smile. "Of course." We sat together at dinner, and he told me about his conference. Every word was a lie, but I didn't interrupt. I just nodded and listened, my heart strangely calm. When he was done, he said, "You're quiet tonight." I smiled faintly. "Just tired, I guess." He reached across the table and touched my hand, a gesture that once would have melted me, but now it felt foreign, like someone trying to touch a memory that no longer existed. That night, as he slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't sure what came next: confrontation, separation, or maybe something else entirely. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't keep living like this. The silence that once broke my heart had now become my armor, and this time I would use it. It's strange, the calm that comes before destruction. For weeks, I carried the truth like a secret flame, burning quietly inside me. I didn't confront him immediately. I watched him, the way he smiled when his phone buzzed, the way he turned it face down when I entered the room, the way he kissed my cheek out of habit, not affection. But something had changed in me. I wasn't the same woman who begged for his attention or cried into her pillow at night. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and the truth has a way of turning heartbreak into clarity. One Sunday morning, while he was reading the paper, I decided I'd had enough. The air felt heavy with unspoken words, and I could no longer carry the weight of silence. I poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from him. He didn't even look up. "Daniel?" I said softly. He murmured, eyes still on the paper. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." He glanced up, slightly annoyed. "What now, Emma?" "Who is Sophie?" The color drained from his face. He blinked, caught off guard, but tried to mask it with a forced laugh. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the messages, Daniel." My voice trembled, but my eyes stayed locked on his. "The ones on your phone, the ones where you tell her you miss her, the hotel, the lies." He froze. The silence stretched between us like a blade. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, defensive. "You went through my phone?" That was all he could say. Not an apology, not even surprise at being found out, just anger that I had uncovered it. I laughed bitterly. "That's what you're upset about? That I looked? Not that you've been betraying me?" He slammed the newspaper down. "You had no right, Emma. That's my private life." "Private life?" My voice cracked. "We're married, Daniel. Your private life is supposed to include me." He stood up, pacing the room, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand. Things haven't been good between us for a long time." I felt tears sting my eyes. "So your solution was to find someone else? To punish me with silence until I disappeared from your life?" He turned sharply, eyes cold. "You're always playing the victim. You think I wanted this? You think I planned it?" I swallowed hard. "Then what do you call it, Daniel? An accident? You don't accidentally build a second life with someone else." For a moment, he looked like he might break. His shoulders slumped, his face softened, and then he said something I'll never forget. "She made me feel alive again." The words sliced through me. Alive, as if I had been the reason he'd felt dead. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, trying to find the man I'd once loved in the stranger standing before me. But he wasn't there anymore. After a long silence, he sighed. "I never meant to hurt you." I shook my head slowly. "That's the problem, Daniel. You didn't mean to hurt me. You just didn't care enough not to." He looked away, shame flickering across his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. But it sounded hollow, like a word he didn't believe in anymore. "I spent years trying to understand your silence," I said, my voice steady now. "I thought maybe you were tired, or stressed, or depressed. I blamed myself for everything, but now I realize you were just saving your words for someone else." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't want this to come out like this." "Then how, Daniel?" I demanded. Were you planning to tell me before or after your next conference? He didn't answer. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't his weapon. It was mine. I stood up slowly. You know, I used to think your silence was cruel because it made me feel invisible. But now I understand it was cruel because it made me believe I was the problem. He looked at me, eyes wide, as if he'd never really seen me before. I don't even hate you, I said softly. I just feel sorry for you. You gave your heart to someone new, but you had to kill another person's spirit to do it. He took a step toward me. Emma, please. Don't. I raised my hand. Don't come closer. You've already said everything without saying a word. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock, a cruel reminder of all the years we'd wasted pretending. Then I said the words that had been building inside me for months. I'm leaving. He blinked. What? I'm done, Daniel. I can't be in a house that feels like a graveyard. I can't keep pretending this is marriage. You took my love and buried it under your silence. I'm finally done digging. He stared at me, genuinely stunned. You can't just walk away. I smiled sadly. That's the thing about silence. It teaches you how to leave quietly. I went upstairs, packed a small suitcase, and for the first time in years, I didn't cry. As I closed the door behind me, I felt something strange. Not sadness, not anger, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from finally letting go of a story that was never going to change. When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. The same world I'd been trapped in for years suddenly looked new, full of noise, color, and possibility. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe to my sister's place. Maybe just to a quiet hotel for a few days. But wherever it was, I knew I'd finally stopped waiting for him to speak. Because I'd found my own voice. That night, he called. I didn't answer. He texted, "Please, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. You had years to talk, Daniel. I listened every day, but you chose silence. Then I turned off my phone and looked out the window. For the first time in years, the quiet around me didn't feel cruel. It felt free. Leaving Daniel wasn't like stepping into sunlight. It was more like walking into a storm after years inside a dark room. The air outside was cold, the world too loud, too bright, too alive. For a long time, I didn't know whether I was free or just lost. The first night away, I stayed at a small inn near the countryside. The room was simple, white walls, wooden floors, a single bed. No photos, no memories, no ghosts. For the first time in years, I slept without listening for another person's breath beside me. When I woke up, sunlight poured through the window. It felt strange to open my eyes and not feel that weight of tension in my chest. No half-hearted greetings, no quiet breakfast in a silent kitchen. Just me, alone, but breathing freely. I made coffee, sat by the window, and realized something I hadn't in a long time. I didn't have to speak softly anymore. I didn't have to measure my words, hoping not to be met with indifference. I could talk, laugh, sing, or stay silent because I wanted to, not because someone else chose it for me. But freedom, I learned, has its own kind of loneliness. At night, I'd hear the wind outside and think of our old home. I'd wonder if Daniel even noticed I was gone. Was he with her now? Was he relieved? Did he feel anything at all? Those thoughts hurt. They cut deep. But they were different from before. The pain wasn't from trying to hold on anymore. It was from learning how to let go. One evening, I sat on the balcony, a blanket around my shoulders, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in soft pink and orange, the way it used to look on the evenings when Daniel and I first met. I smiled sadly, remembering the way he used to brush my hair behind my ear, how he once promised to always talk things through. I whispered to the wind, "You broke that promise, Daniel, but I'm still here." That sentence became my small victory, proof that I hadn't been destroyed, only changed. After a week at the inn, I moved into a small flat near the city. It wasn't much, a single room with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet, but it was mine. I painted the walls pale blue, hung fairy lights, and bought secondhand furniture. Each little thing I did felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I started working again at a local bookstore. I'd always loved books, the quiet of them, the way they spoke without sound. There was comfort in being surrounded by stories that ended differently than mine. The people there were kind. The manager, Linda, was a warm woman in her 40s who noticed things without prying. One day, she found me wiping tears from my eyes while shelving a romance novel. "Bad day?" she asked gently. I smiled faintly. "Bad years." She chuckled softly. "Then it's time for good ones." I didn't know how, but somehow her words stayed with me. Days turned into weeks. The silence that used to suffocate me began to feel like peace. I'd play soft music in the evenings, cook for myself, sometimes even dance barefoot in the kitchen. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was healing. And healing, I realized, is its own kind of love story. One afternoon, while I was arranging a display at the bookstore, a man walked in. Tall, quiet, a little awkward, the kind of person who seemed more comfortable in silence than in conversation. He asked for a poetry book, his voice gentle but unsure. "Do you have something by Leonard Cohen?" he asked. "Of course," I said, leading him to the shelf. "He's one of my favorites." He smiled, a little shyly. "Mine too." As I handed him the book, our fingers brushed for just a second. I felt a small spark. Not love, not attraction, just warmth. The simple reminder that connection still existed somewhere out there. He thanked me and left, but before walking out, he turned and said, "I'm Oliver, by the way. Maybe I'll see you again." Something about the way he said it made my heart feel a little lighter. Over the next few weeks, he did come back, sometimes to buy books, sometimes just to talk. He'd tell me about the poems he loved, and I'd tell him about the stories that saved me. We never talked about our pasts. It was as if we both understood that silence could mean peace, not punishment. It was strange, learning that silence could be kind again. One evening, after closing time, I found myself walking with Oliver through the park. The air was crisp, the leaves turning gold with autumn. "You seem different lately," he said softly. I smiled. "Maybe I'm learning how to exist again." He nodded, understanding more than words could explain. Sometimes it's not about finding happiness. It's about finding yourself. I looked at him, surprised. That's exactly it. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not by someone who wanted to fix me, but by someone who simply noticed me. When I got home that night, I made tea and sat by the window, thinking about the woman I'd become, stronger, quieter, but not broken. The next morning, I got a message from Daniel. "I miss you. I made a mistake. Please, can we talk?" My heart skipped. For a brief second, the old part of me, the one that craved his approval, stirred. But then I remembered every silent dinner, every lonely night, every tear shed beside a man who refused to speak. I typed my reply slowly, carefully. "You don't get to miss someone you chose to ignore." Then I turned off my phone, and for the first time, I smiled. Because I finally understood that silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means strength, the kind that comes from walking away, healing quietly, and choosing peace over pain. That night, as I closed my eyes, I whispered to myself, "You made it, Emma." And for once, I believed it. It had been 6 months since I left Daniel. 6 long, healing months where the quiet didn't hurt anymore. My little flat had become a sanctuary. Soft music, the scent of fresh coffee, stacks of books by the window. The world had color again. But peace, I learned, is fragile. Sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. It finds a way to knock on your door just when you start breathing freely. It was a rainy Thursday. I'd just returned from the bookstore, soaked but smiling, carrying a new poetry collection Oliver had recommended. I made tea, changed into my worn jumper, and sat near the window, watching the raindrops chase each other down the glass. Then, there was a knock. 3 slow knocks. Heavy, deliberate. I froze. Few people ever visited me. Linda always called before coming. Oliver usually texted. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my breath caught. It was Daniel. He stood there, rain dripping from his hair, hands trembling slightly. He looked older, thinner, but those eyes, they were the same cold, unreadable eyes I had stared into for years. "Emma," he said quietly, "can I come in?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. My body remembered everything my mind had tried to forget. The silence, the distance, the ache. I wanted to slam the door, but something inside me whispered, "You're not that woman anymore. You don't run, you face it." So, I stepped aside. 5 minutes, I said. He nodded, stepping into my world, the one I had built without him. His eyes wandered over the soft lights, the books, the photos on the shelf, one of me and Linda, another of the bookstore staff, and one of a golden sunset I'd taken on my phone. "It's nice," he murmured. "Peaceful." "Yes," I said, crossing my arms. "It is." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "You look different, happier." "I am." For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain outside. Then he looked down. "I've missed you, Emma. Every day." I laughed softly, bitterly. "You missed me? You missed the woman you ignored?" He winced. "I know I was cold. I know I hurt you. Daniel," I cut him off. "You didn't just hurt me. You erased me. For years, I lived in the same house as you, and it felt like I didn't exist." He took a shaky breath. "I didn't mean to. I was lost. Work, pressure, everything. I didn't know how to talk. I didn't realize what I was doing to you until you left." I shook my head. "That's not an excuse. You chose silence. You chose not to care." He stepped closer, eyes pleading. "I didn't choose silence, Emma. I was afraid of confrontation. Every time I saw you cry, I felt helpless. I thought staying quiet would make it easier." I felt tears burn my eyes, not from love, from exhaustion. "You thought silence was easier than love?" He looked down, ashamed. "I know now it wasn't. Please, just give me one chance. I'm seeing someone for therapy. I'm trying to fix myself. I want us back." His words might have melted me once, but now they just made me sad. "Daniel," I said softly, "you don't get to come back and ask for forgiveness just because you're ready. I begged for your words when I was breaking. You had years to talk. Years." He ran a hand through his hair. "So that's it? You've moved on?" I hesitated. I've moved forward. He looked around again, his gaze landing on the poetry book on my table, the one Oliver gave me. Someone new? He asked, bitterness creeping in. I sighed. There's someone kind, someone who listens, but that's not the point. He stepped closer again. I still love you. I closed my eyes. You love the memory of me, the woman who stayed, who waited, but she doesn't exist anymore. He reached out, trying to touch my hand. I stepped back. His face fell. For the first time, I saw real tears in his eyes. Maybe it was guilt, maybe regret. Maybe he finally understood what his silence had done. I never meant to lose you, he whispered. You didn't lose me, Daniel, I said quietly. You let me go, one silent day at a time. The room was still. Only the rain spoke. He wiped his eyes and nodded slowly. I guess I deserved that. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. If you ever need me, I won't, I said softly. He nodded once, defeated, and walked out into the rain. I watched as his figure disappeared down the street, swallowed by the storm. And just like that, the past left. Not with anger, but with closure. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply. For years, I had imagined this moment, confronting him, telling him how much he hurt me. But now that it had happened, I didn't feel revenge or triumph. I just felt peace. I made tea and sat by the window again. The rain had softened, and a faint light broke through the clouds. The world outside shimmered, cleansed and quiet. Oliver texted me a few minutes later. Rainy night, thought of you, hope you're warm. I smiled, not because of love, but because it felt real, gentle, unforced. I typed back, I'm warm, thank you. Then I whispered to myself, goodbye, Daniel. And for the first time, the silence in my home felt sacred, not cruel. I realized that life doesn't always give you the ending you wanted, but sometimes it gives you the one you need. A year had passed since the night Daniel came back. A whole year of seasons changing, of tiny miracles I once thought I'd never feel again. I remember waking up one morning to birdsong drifting through the open window. Not the sound of someone moving around in another room, not the tension of waiting for a word, but simple, ordinary peace. That's when I realized I'd stopped counting the days since I left. Because I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. My little blue flat had transformed. The walls were lined with books, soft yellow lights, dried flowers in mason jars. The air smelled of vanilla and paper. Every corner held something of me. My laughter had filled the space so many times now, it felt like it belonged here. And sometimes, Oliver's laughter filled it too. He hadn't rushed me. He never asked for more than I could give. He was simply there, like a quiet melody you only notice when you stop to listen. We often met at the bookstore, sometimes sharing coffee after closing. We talked about everything, about words, about music, about what it meant to start again when you thought you were finished. One night, we went walking by the river. The moonlight scattered across the water, the city shimmering in the distance. He turned to me, hands in his coat pockets. You know, he said softly, when I first met you, you looked like someone who'd forgotten how to breathe. I smiled faintly. I had. And now? He asked. Now I breathe on purpose. He smiled back, that quiet, kind smile that never demanded anything. We stood there in silence for a while, and for once, silence didn't hurt. It healed. Sometimes I thought about Daniel, Not often, but sometimes. The way you think about a dream you used to have every night but can't remember anymore. There was no anger left, no ache, just distance. One rainy afternoon, I found myself walking past the cafe Daniel and I used to visit. I paused outside, looking through the window. There he was, sitting alone, staring out at the rain, a half-empty cup before him. He looked smaller somehow, quieter in a different way. For a moment, our eyes met. He gave a faint, tired smile, not the kind that begged, but the kind that said, "I understand." I nodded once, smiled softly back, and walked away. It wasn't a movie moment, no background music, just real, ordinary closure. And that was enough. Months later, life unfolded like gentle pages of a new book. Oliver and I started a small poetry club at the bookstore. People came from all over the city, broken hearts, hopeful souls, dreamers, writers. We sat in a circle every Friday evening, candles flickering, sharing words that once saved us. One night, it was my turn to read. I hesitated before standing up, my hands trembling slightly. "I wrote something," I said. "It's not a poem, it's a goodbye." I unfolded the paper, took a breath, and began. Once, I lived in a house full of silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that bruises quietly, the kind that eats at you until you stop asking for sound. I waited for words that never came, for warmth that never touched me. And then one day, I realized that I didn't need his voice to feel alive. I had my own. I left. And in leaving, I didn't just lose someone. I found myself. So if you ever find yourself in a silence that hurts, remember, you are not hard to love. You are just standing in the wrong kind of quiet. When I finished, the room was silent. But this time, the silence felt different. Safe, sacred, full. Someone started clapping softly, then another. Soon the whole room joined in. I felt tears spill down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of pain. They were release. Afterward, Oliver found me by the counter, holding 2 mugs of tea. "That," he said, "was beautiful." I smiled. It was my truth. He nodded, "And you turned it into light." I looked at him for a long moment. Maybe that's what healing is. Taking something that once broke you and letting it shine instead. He didn't reply. He just held my hand, gently, as if he knew words weren't needed anymore. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars. The same sky that once looked indifferent now felt alive, like it was listening. When I reached my door, I paused for a moment, taking in the stillness around me. The quiet that once felt like a prison now felt like a prayer. I whispered to myself. The same words I'd once said in fear, now said in gratitude. I endured his silent cruelty for years, but it taught me the power of my own voice. I smiled,